Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into the Vegas Insider YouTube channel, The Daily Insider. I am Thom Cunningham, and today we have a very special edition. We have the third golfing major of the year. The U.S. Open is on the horizon. As always, we are joined by our golf betting expert, Matt Cooper. Matt, how are you? And are you ready for this third major of the year?
Buzzing about the return to Torrey Pines and also the fact we've had quite a successful time with it in the first two majors this year when we've had our chats. So the positive side of me is excited to make it a hat trick. The negative side of me is like going, oh, I've run my race for the majors this year. But no, generally speaking, I'm quite confident this week.
And we are going to a course that a lot of people are familiar with, Torrey Pines, for this big event. The Torrey Pines course, that is the host of the Farmers Insurance Open. So it's a very familiar course. What is your take on Torrey Pines and how the course might be a factor going into this weekend?
Yeah, there's a couple of factors about Torrey Pines that you've got to bear in mind. The one is it's an oceanside venue, so it overlooks the Pacific Ocean, so it can get hit by the wind. So you need a player who's going to cope with that sort of thing. It's got Poanua grass, which some golfers like it, others hate it. Brandt Snedeker is a huge lover of it. Unfortunately, he's not there this week. That would have been an absolutely great spot for us to follow in some way or form. But yeah, sometimes it's as important to see people who don't like that grass as much as players who do like it. And then it's also quite intriguing because there's a number of locals this week: Phil Mickelson, Xander Schauffele, even Charlie Hoffman. These guys, they know the course inside out, so they're quite intriguing. And then, like you say, it hosts the Farmers Insurance Open every year, but you have to be a little wary of that form for a couple of reasons. First, the conditions are very different. It's January instead of June, so it tends to be softer. But perhaps another factor is it's not set up by the USGA in January, whereas it is in June, so it's going to be tougher rough, narrower fairways, harder greens. But also in January they play the North course, which is an easier course for one of the pre-cut rounds. So that's something to bear in mind. So you either need to do a little bit of delving, try and find the tee times, or if you want to just hone it and keep it simple, look at the scores on the weekend of players who've played Torrey Pines, because those are all played on the South course.
Yeah, I was going to say this is on the South course, not the North course. And so definitely want to keep that in mind. The Farmers Insurance Open you brought up might be, you might want to be careful, be a bit weary when you're looking at past Farmer Insurance Open winners because of the reasons you just gave. And whenever we sit down and discuss these tournaments, we always talk about how the course in various tournaments that it hosts plays a factor in these events. And you're saying basically for this one, you might not want to look in that direction. Is that correct?
I'm quite happy to make a little bit of a course form, but I think if we take it back to 2008, Tiger Woods is an absolute dynamo, or was a dynamo on Torrey Pines, and of course, as we all know, he won the US Open at Torrey Pines. On the other hand, Rocco Mediate wasn't particularly. Lee Westwood, who perhaps should have won that tournament and didn't. Even he himself admits that, although it could be argued that could be applied to an awful number of majors that Lee Westwood's played. And quite a few of the players were in the top 10. They didn't have particularly good records at Torrey Pines. So I think when players say, and some of the players will say, it's a very different golf course in June compared to January, I'm not sure it's not really a different golf course, but it will kind of fool a few players.
With that said, California is where this is being held. Will the location on the West Coast make a difference? I'm going to go through a list of players who have actually done very well at the U.S. Open. That was in California in the West Coast. You have Graham McDowell at Pebble Beach. You have Gary Woodland and Webb Simpson, who have done well at the U.S. Open when it's held in California. So do you think maybe the West Coast might play a factor for some of these players that have succeeded in California? You even mentioned Phil Mickelson being a local. He's done well in that state as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people were a little surprised when Gary Woodland did so well at Pebble Beach. However, you could argue that Graham McDowell, it kind of made a lot of sense in this, in that he likes playing in the wind, and pretty much all of the examples that you've given, two of them won at Pebble Beach. Webb Simpson won at the Olympic Club, which we saw in the US Women's Open a couple of weeks ago. That's not as oceanside, but it does get a bit windy. I think the biggest thing that's going to be similar is the fact that the grass on the West Coast. If you look at even like a course like Silverado, which is north of San Francisco, that has Poa Nua on the greens. Riviera, similar grass, Pebble Beach. I'd keep those sort of things in mind, and but mostly I'd worry if somebody goes to California a lot and doesn't do very well. You're probably suspicious that they don't putt on those greens particularly well.
Let's go to the top of the list in terms of the favorites. Jon Rahm right now is the betting favorite across multiple sports books. We know what happened with him in his last event. He ended up getting pulled out due to a COVID test. Jon Rahm has done very well at the Farmers Insurance Open. He won in 2017, and he was a runner-up in 2020. What are your thoughts on Jon Rahm entering this week?
Well, he's one of those players who it's very hard to find anything wrong with his case, because not only did he win on debut at Torrey Pines, but in the 4 subsequent runnings of that event, he's not only done quite well in them, but every single time he slept either leading or one shot back of the lead during the tournament. So basically, he's played this tournament 5 times and he's got bang into contention every single time. Now, if you're somebody who likes to back to lay, that's quite a potent sort of record that he's got there. Also, of course, he led the Memorial by a country mile and then had to get pulled out because of the COVID test. Now that might act in a couple of ways. One, it's quite a distraction that he's had over the last fortnight. 2, he was quite clearly in great form and now he's got the bit between his teeth. Now we all know he's not yet won a major. He's surely going to win a major sooner or later, and sometimes what it needs is something in the back of your head that's saying, I'm going to show these guys this week. And that's frequently what happens with major winners. And it could well be that that Rahm will use the disappointment of Muirfield Village to his advantage this week.
We talked a little bit about Bryson DeChambeau last time, and I know I always say with Bryson that I know your opinion about Bryson is that to be careful with him. You got to tiptoe around betting Bryson DeChambeau. Now, he won this event in 2020. Do we want to tiptoe around him again this year, or do we want to back him to be a possible 2-time back-to-back champion, which, as you know, is basically impossible in golf majors? So what is your take on Bryson? Do we tiptoe around him this weekend, or do we feel confident betting in him?
Well, it's increasingly he's an enigma to begin with, but in the majors it's becoming even more so. He was so impressive, finishing 4th in the PGA last year and 1st in this event, and he was almost clinical. But in the 3 majors that we've seen him in since, he's almost been downright comical, because he's been, to be frank, useless at the Masters twice, and freely admits that the fact that Augusta National won't allow him to get all his gadgets on site is a real hindrance to him. So, I mean, clearly he loves the science of golf, and when he can't have the green books, when he can't have his machinery that measures all sorts of things on the range, he's fooled a little bit. And he did say that he didn't really know what he was doing at Augusta. Now, the worry would be that kind of looked like it transferred over to Kiawah Island. It's also the fact that when he was brilliant at Bay Hill leading, brilliant for 54 holes at the Players' Championship, he hasn't been anywhere near that form ever since. Now, that's got to be a bit of a worry. There's also another concern with him, and that's not just the difficulty of going back-to-back in the US Open, but it's that he does say that he loves this golf course because he played here in the World Juniors. It's an annual event where lots of kids turn up. He says he loved it there. The only 2 times he's played it as a professional, he's missed the cut.
Oh, wow.
Now, bear in mind, one of those rounds wasn't on this course. But for a fellow who says he loves the place, it's a bit worrying that A, he missed those 2 cuts, and B, he stopped going there, because clearly something, if you love the place, you'd keep going every year, and he hasn't done that.
Well, what's interesting is now I'm looking through the favorites. We've been through Ron, we've been through DeChambeau, and Dustin Johnson is sitting around the top three as well. When we discussed Dustin Johnson going over major events this past year in 2021, we've been a bit rubbish on him. Did he do anything this past weekend at the Palmetto Championship to change your opinion of Dustin Johnson, or is he still a favorite that you feel comfortable fading entering the U.S. Open this weekend?
I'd be a bit more. I felt quite confident in the first two majors to fade him. I'd be a little more wary now. As you say, he contended at Congaree last week, looked good. He faded in the final round, but I'm not. That puts me off backing him, but it would put. But the fact that he played well all week, and actually his tee to green game was a lot better than it has been for a long time. His strokes gained stats were good through 54 holes, so that puts me off actually making an effort to fade him. But I wouldn't at the moment be too confident of backing him either. He also doesn't have the greatest record at Torrey Pines. Now, if it had been once or twice, I mean, I think there's a point with Bryson DeChambeau when he's making out that he loves the place and then he's not done very well in two performances and then stopped going. That kind of puts me off. Johnson's slightly different. He keeps going there, but not doing very much when he does get there. So somebody as good as Dustin Johnson probably would have had to weigh in with a lot of good stuff at Torrey Pines before I'd be too keen. I also, if I'm really honest, I always remember that it was at Pebble Beach that Dustin Johnson really should have won the US Open in 2010, and he just had an absolute collapse ahead of the final round. And a little bit of me thinks if he's seen the Pacific Ocean, there might be some sort of echo in the back of his head there. But when push comes to shove, the world number one, I think you'd need to be in better form for me to actually go and back him.
So a couple more names near the top of the list I want to go through. Brooks Koepka stands out for obvious reasons. He's been a runner-up at this event in 3 of the last 4 U.S. Opens, or he's been a top 2 in 3 of the last 4 U.S. Opens. He played pretty well last major, but Phil Mickelson was just a little too much to handle. What do you think about Brooks Koepka going into this weekend? Is he too expensive to take for what we've seen of him, or was the PGA Championship enough for you to say, you know what, I think I'm comfortable backing this guy who plays well during majors?
I'm a bit torn with Brooks Koepka this week. I think his major record is just so good.
Yeah.
For such a long time. This is clearly a bloke who just loves the test. And I just wonder a little bit if he's just cresting the wave a little bit, and that business he had going where he understands that in the major championships, most of the field's going to beat itself. So he kind of just like drifts through the week. He minimizes all of his potential errors. He chatted to English woman Mel Reid ahead of the US Women's Open, and she didn't quite reveal the strategy that he takes, but she half did, and it's quite boring. It's just like, you know, if you get into trouble, get out, mate, bogey. Don't try and think special, because most of the field are going to try something special and they're going to lose 2 or 3 shots in those positions. So he kind of also knows that he's almost trolling the field when he does it, because he just drops all these little hints about like they're going to lose, and it's kind of worked. But I think there's almost like it's got a shelf life, that idea, and I just wonder if it possibly is going to how long will it have shelf life? I'm not sure. It was interesting. I mean, in the past, you get the sense that Brooks Koepka would have contended a bit harder at Kiawah Island. It wasn't quite the Brooks Koepka of old, but at the same time, I kind of look at his price and think, I think he probably should be shorter than Dustin Johnson, I think, this week.
I could see that, especially with recent form and just their 2021 form. Koepka, I would argue as well, has a slight edge over Dustin Johnson. But maybe the lingering injury has something to do with that from his past. So we'll see. One more name I want to bring up at the top of the favorites list is Patrick Cantley. He won the Memorial. You and I have been talking about his form being rubbish lately. Well, he shut that up last weekend. So what do we think about Patrick Cantley? He's 20-1 to win this event. What I'm looking at right now. Is that a price you're worth backing for Cantley after the performance he had at the Memorial?
Well, there's no doubt that his performance was good at the Memorial. But if you want me to be nominating somebody to fade, I'm going to go with him this week.
Oh, okay, perfect.
it's down to the fact that he's got 2 major championship top 10s in 17 starts, and I think he's one of these guys who he's priced up on reputation a little bit, and I think he deserves a good reputation because he's a damn good player. And maybe not that victory at the Memorial, but the one a couple of years ago was like a really, really impressive final round when he knocked his way past some really good players. I think it needs an asterisk next to it, that Muirfield Village one, because he wouldn't have won if John Rahm hadn't been hooked out of the field. But I mean, when the opportunity was there, he grabbed it, and I thought he played very well. But I'm a bit more worried about this business that he really hasn't played he hasn't played like the player that he's rated by the bookies in the majors so far. And I'm not entirely convinced that he's only had 3 trips to Torrey Pines, but he's not done anything special when he's been there. So I'm happy to avoid him, and actually would actively fade him, I think.
Got a trend here for you. Australian golfers, some Aussies here. Australian golfers, and I know we talked about the Farmers Insurance Open not playing too much of a factor, or maybe bettors shouldn't look too much into past Farmer Insurance Open results for picking a winner this week at the US Open. But this stood out to me. An Aussie golfer has won 3 of the last 7 at the Farmers Insurance Open at Torrey Pines, and they've been a runner-up in 4 of those 7. The list of names include Adam Scott, Jason Day twice, and Mark Leitchman. Do any of those 3 Australian golfers, do you fancy any of them to perform well this weekend at Torrey Pines due to their past success in the state of California, and particularly at this course? I know that they're playing on a different, north-south course, but there is a trend here that says Australian golfers tend to do well at Torrey Pines. Is that something you'll back this weekend, or would you fade most of these Australian golfers, such as Day, Leitchman, and Adam Scott?
I think they're all a really intriguing case, actually. I did notice just before I came on that I have a funny feeling. While I chatter, do you want to just quickly? So I have a feeling that Jason Day may have dropped out. Could be he's got an injury problems, but he's actually quite fascinating. Even if he is still in, I got a quote from him about the Farmers Insurance Open, and he more or less says, every time I won there, and he's won twice, so he clearly likes the place. Every time I've won there, I've had a really low one on the North course. Well, that's kind of like the klaxon should be sounding there, because this week, if he plays, he hasn't got 18 holes to sort of murder the North course and then cling on at the South course. He's got to play all 72 holes on the South course. So there's a klaxon for you with Jason Day. Mark Leitchman is a really strange one because his record in the US Open is pretty rubbish. I think he's got only one of his US Opens has been any good. But at Torrey Pines, he absolutely loves the place. And he's actually on record as saying the grass that you put on at Torrey Pines is exactly what he grew up on in Australia. And that's where his comfort level comes from. I mean, he's twice a runner-up. He's a winner. Now, it's a strange way. So there's a brilliant sort of, if there's a test tube this week, Mark Leishman's in it, and we're dropping sort of like chemicals in to try and test out what's going on. And one of them's dropping course form and one of them's dropping US Open form, and we're going to see which one sort of smokes. I'm a bit confused about which it could be. Then Adam Scott's interesting. He's also got a pretty poor record in the US Open. This is the major that he performs worst in. He's not disastrous in it, but he performs better in every other. I think this is the only major he's not got a top 3 in so far. But the flip side is he's actually played quite nicely the last 2 times he's gone to Torrey Pines. So I'm confused by all 3, if I'm really honest. I agree with you that Torrey Pines seems to be a nice spot for Aussies. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, it's like the grass, like Leishman says, they like playing in wind. They're playing by the ocean. I don't want to like end up talking about national stereotypes, but they see the surf. They get a stubby and they have a bit that they think they're like home. There's an element of that possibly. It wouldn't surprise me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I could see the location absolutely being a factor for Australian golfers being on the coast with the wind, and as you mentioned, the grass type being very similar to something they grow up on with over there. Yeah, definitely.
Just quick. Yeah. Sorry, Tom. Just quickly, the one thing I would say is I would double check this. If I'm assuming he has. If Adam Scott's got Steve Williams on the bag, Steve Williams has a lot of experience at Torrey Pines with Tiger Woods, so he knows how to play the golf course. And if we're talking about that silly stereotype I was on about, Adam Scott loves surfing. If he's seeing people surf in the surf when he's playing, that's got to be knocking. You know, the endorphins are going to be flickering. And if if there was one, I'd probably go with Adam Scott.
Okay, and I love the Steve Williams bit right there. Yeah, whenever you have a guy who's done well with Tiger Woods at Torrey Pines, coaching you, so, giving you advice, that can't be a bad thing. Okay, great. So we've gone through some favorites, gone through some trends. The course information kind of skew away from it with this event because of the north to south locations, even though they are at Torrey Pines. Now for the fun one. Give me your long shot. Who has insane odds that you think, hey, they actually have I might want to sprinkle some money on them?
Well, I'm going to sound like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I'm going to stick with the man who brought home the bacon at Kiawah Island, Shane Lowry. He's not huge odds, but he's an outsider. And I just really like the way that he responded to that week.
Yeah, he finished well.
Yeah, well, basically what happened was he came on an open media Zoom call a couple of days after Kiawah Island, and he was kind of like really chipper about the whole week. He basically said he couldn't putt on Kiawah. He just couldn't read them. He said Phil Mickelson clearly could read them. He said, but I couldn't. And he said, you might even have seen my 8-foot putt for birdie on the final hole. And he said, I didn't even hit the hole. And he said, it was a good putt. He says, everybody watching must have thought, what is he doing with that putt? But he said, I had a perfect putt. I just had no idea where to put it. And he said, if it wasn't for the putter, I really think I could have won that week. And the stats do back it up. And oddly, famously, he had a photograph taken of himself when he hoiked his tee shot onto the beach. But other than that, he actually played tee to green really, really well. We know he can play in the wind because he won at Port Rush. His form's been really nice this season. He played well at Sawgrass, played well at Harbour Town, played really well at Kiawah Island. And another thing he said was he understands how to play majors at the moment. So there's his strategy is a little bit different, but he's talking a little bit like Brooks Koepka. And in his case, he says he knows there are times when you're not playing very well in a major week, and you just have to get through 6-7 holes of not playing very well and wait for the fact when you suddenly catch a light and you play 6 holes quite well. And also he's a little bit of good experience at Torrey Pines. It's not going to leap out and you go, yeah, he's got a great record there, but he's got enough experience of playing quite well. And he's also been to the course 3 or 4 times. So he's got a little bit of knowledge about what goes on there. So he's not huge, but I like his chances.
And you mentioned, I'm going through some odds right here, and there's a special that I see here for players to make or miss the cut. And we talked a little bit about Bryson DeChambeau, and when he goes to Torrey Pines, even though he claims he likes it, he doesn't do well. He has odds to miss the cut at plus 300 or 3-1. Are those odds you would worth testing, or is that too short because Bryson's too good of a player? Would you take the 3-1 that he misses the cut? Or
that's quite interesting. I think if you told me it was going to be 4-1, I'd have got quite tempted. I tell you who I would be interested in is what's Sergio Garcia's odds to miss the cut, because he's got a terrible record at the moment in the major championships. He has not. I think he finished tied 20th the tournament after he won the Masters. But basically, he hasn't finished in the top 50 at a major ever since the year that he won the Masters, which is 2017. Something about them just isn't working with Sergio, and I think he was plus 150 to miss the cut at Kiawah Island, and did do, and I kicked myself for not backing him. So I'm slightly tempted to. And actually, the other thing is he's missed 4 of his last 7 cuts. He's a bit of an oddball at the moment, Sergio. 4 of his last 6, he's missed the cut. The other 2, he's had a first round lead and then drifted all week. So it's pure boom or bust at the moment for Sergio.
Awesome. And so we have, we've got our favorite to fade. We've got our long shot to watch out for. We have a good market to watch in terms of missed cuts for Sergio Garcia. Is there any names, any bets that you fancy that we haven't discussed yet? Maybe another favorite you like, a name we haven't discussed, anything that we're missing in terms of best bets for the US Open this weekend?
Well, I think if you look at the trends, and I know you like a trend, Tom, I've got a few for you here. Basically, the sort of thing you need to be looking out for, if you look at the last 10 winners of the US Open, all 10 were under 35. That kind of makes sense. It's a tough test. You need a lot of, you need fitness, resilience. It's a long test, so you need some strength. 10 out of those 10 were world top 30 players, so you've got to be elite. 10 out of 10 had played 1 to 8 US Opens. It's almost as if you played a lot of US Open golf, it's almost like, you know, the juice is gone. So, you know, you need to be relatively fresh, but relatively experienced. 10 out of that 10 had finished top 25 in the US Open before. So, you know, you've proved yourself in USGA conditions. And 10 out of 10 had had a top 3 that season. And now that points to one man, as far as I can see. And that fellow is a local. It's not Phil Mickelson. It's not Charlie Hoffman. It's Xander Schauffele, who has actually he's played 4 US Opens. He's never finished outside the top 6. He loves major championships. The test really suits him. He's got an interesting backstory for this year's majors. So he very nearly won Augusta. I think there was a little bit of a bad reaction to that, and then he kind of, but at the same time, a good reaction to it. He sort of claims that when he got bang into contention late in that final round, and he put the ball into the water on the 16th, he doesn't think it was quite as bad as everybody else thinks. He might be talking himself away from bad vibes. I don't know. If he is, about 2 weeks later, he started to sound quite sort of sanguine and educated about what had happened. I think he'll get over. I think basically he thinks he's got experience of being in contention again, and I think that will help him. Also, Phil Mickelson says playing Xander Schauffele was what inspired him to win.
Oh wow!
And they play money matches basically around San Diego, and Phil said basically this guy was so good, I had to get good enough to compete with him. I think that might sort of be quite a good vibe for Schauffele. Yeah, I mean, the slight worry is he hasn't won for a long time, but at the same time, nobody took fewer shots than him at East Lake last year. Unfortunately for him, the PGA has introduced this strange scoring system at the Tour Championship where there's handicaps at the start of the week. So he's kind of won, but he kind of hasn't won. But yeah, I mean, there are odds of higher than 20 to 1 out there just about for him. And if
I'm looking at 15 to 1 right now for him.
Right, there are ones, but even then, I think the guy's got a good chance. He knows how to get involved in major championships.
Absolutely. Great stuff, Matt, as always. And can you go ahead and remind our listeners where they can find some of your robust golfing material?
Yep, no problem. So at Matt Cooper Golf on Twitter, and also at planetsports.com. Awesome.
Great stuff, Matt, as always. Thanks for coming on and talking some US Open, and enjoy the major.
Yeah, and I hope everyone enjoys it back home.
Appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to the Open sooner rather than later. We should probably be seeing a normal golfing schedule next year, I would imagine. But good stuff. Matt Cooper, definitely want to check him out on Twitter, and check out his website for all of his golfing work as well. And you can hop on to VegasInsider.com. We have golfing odds, we'll have props, picks, and best bets prediction pieces for this US Open, which begins on Thursday. But for Matt Cooper, I'm Thom Cunningham. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Please be sure to like, subscribe to the video, follow us on all social platforms, but most importantly, go out there and make some good bets and make some money. Until next time, we'll see you.